Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
This Friday afternoon, you're very welcome along to Friday Night Racing. It's Ger Gilroy and Johnny Ward with you every Friday afternoon. We stream at 3 o'clock on all of our social channels. The best place these days to get us is on the OTB Sports app. You can get that in the App Store. Just search OTB Sports. And then every Friday evening, we're on Off the Ball on News Talk from 8 o'clock. And this is going to be a good show, Johnny. I can feel it in my bones.
Well, you're making a very big call there, Ger. I remember when I was studying journalism in DCU, I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was one of my lecturers, and I started off the article by saying, what follows is an interesting story of such and such, and he said, well, don't tell the reader straight away that it's interesting, because he or she might think it's crap, but it is Tony Mullins, so it's not going to be crap.
Well, there you go, and I would fundamentally disagree with your journalism teacher. I would say, you know.
There was a long time ago now in DCU, Jerry. You know, I'm talking 20 years at this stage.
You are an old man, it's true.
I am. Getting older with every day in lockdown as well.
Let's get things going. Let's relive an amazing moment from Longchamp last Saturday with Princess Zoe from the depths of hell. Take it away.
Elquin is still in front as they came towards the top of the straight. In fact, he's opened up a break of probably a good 6 or 7 lengths. In second placing is battling away there Princess Zoe. Call the Wind plugs on, followed then by Winstoss. Inside the final 300, and it's Elquin well in advance. Plugging on, trying to stay on. Princess Zoe, she is slowly but surely pegging back. Elquin, he's getting very tired, but he still has a 4-length advantage inside the final 200. Princess Zoe, she's trying hard on the near side. She is starting to rally. Elquin is in front, inside the 100. Is the post going to be able to be picking up? Princess Zoe, the outside, she moved up, she grabbed the lead, she outstayed him. And Princess Zoe went home to beat Elquin.
Tony Mullins, good afternoon to you. How you doing?
Good, very good.
Does that make the hairs in the back of your neck stand up a little bit again?
For about the 120th time this week.
We were saying in the office today, there's almost nothing as exciting in life as watching a horse come from the depths of hell and pip another horse on the line. It's great for us who aren't involved. For you standing there watching the big screen, what was that like?
Well, you see, it was a little bit mixed because at the 500, the lads I was watching it with, they were all sort of hoping. And I said, look, she hasn't won. She hasn't won. Down to the 3, down to the 2. And suddenly coming near the 1, I said, she's not going to get there. And, you know, while I was delighted still to be placed in the Group 1, you know, my heart went down a bit. The next thing, you know, we were on the stand, a huge stand, and there was only about 10 of us on a stand that would fit 10,000. And when she got her nose up onto his tail and I could see her quickening, I had to be careful. I nearly just lost my knees. I never got such a surge of excitement to go from being very comfortable to being a little disheartened to the massive surge of excitement in 15 seconds. It was just something I had heard about, but it never happened to me before.
There is something mad about being involved in the game of racing, and we talk about it all the time, is that you chase that high so often, but most of the time you never get it.
Yeah, I mean, our game is hard from the point of view of you have a massive, a massive strike rate if you can maintain 20%. So that means 4 times out of 5 you lose. And that's for the top lads. So can you imagine, most people have an average strike rate of about 8%, 9%, so that's less than 1 in 10 times you're going to have a success.
And here we are talking about the level of success it's Arc Weekend at Longchamp. It's like the cream of the crop. Does that add extra to it? Because,
Does it what? Jesus, man, sure. I mean, it's the world stage. And, you just can't get any better. Like, I mean, it's like practicing hurling here in Gordon and then suddenly being in Croke Park. Yeah.
And with this horse as well, which has such a dramatic backstory.
Yeah, well, it's an amazing story that, first of all, she's a well-exposed handicapper that failed to win in 10 runs last year. The whole season she had 10 runs and didn't win a race. Now, she ran well. She was second a couple of times. And then she comes here and we upped her in distance significantly. And it seemed to bring about a huge improvement. Then we were quite lucky that the rain came for us every day because a cut in the ground definitely suits her. And then, of course, the first day we famously got beaten. And, you know, that then it got a bit of a flattener for a while. But then I knew going to the ladies' race in the Curragh, I said, nothing will beat this one. I just thought maybe she was one of the biggest certainties I ever ran. And she won accordingly, so I was vindicated. Then going on to Galway, I was hopeful. We had to, you know, Jodie Townend rode her in the Curragh, which is a ladies' race, just the ladies' derby. Then we go to Galway, and we end up in an amateur race, which is known as the Amateur Derby. And we have to get another jockey. And then she wins that in a dramatic finish. She bursts through at the last 100 yards. And then we go down to the Saturday at the festival meeting in Galway again. And again, we have to get another new jockey. So, I mean, for all these different jockeys to ride her, and she comes up with the same result every time. Now, they give her lovely rides, each one of them. And then we came on to the listed race. And, you know, the listed race was very exciting because Ennis Diamond was third in that and she was second in the English Oaks. So I knew we were tying into group form at this stage. And then about 7-8 days before the French race, Joey Sheridan came down and rode her work here. And I was often up on the gallops here for the last 30 years wondering, you know, what would it be like to have a Group 1 horse? And then I said to myself a few times, you know, would you even know if you had one? You know, the minute I had one, I knew it. I knew when she worked that morning, Jackie, the girl who is the head travelling girl here and looks after Zoe, she was coming down that day. And I said, we had a sort of made arrangements because of all this corona and the isolating and that when you come home, she wasn't going to go. And I just said, Jackie, this is too important. I said, you just have to go. And she was looking at me like, you know, we had arrangements made another way. I said, Jackie, this is just too important. I think we're going to maybe win a race here. And, you know, I felt it in my bones she wasn't going to get beat. So, it all worked out.
Have you sent out a few mass cards to any punter who managed to back her in Navan when she was beaten off 64 in light of what she's achieved since?
Yeah, well, you see, it was a very unlucky thing what happened. I know the mare, and she's had old problems, and she's a bit crutchy, and maybe most conventional trainers would be saying that one now she has no stride, and but I knew she had a potential, and I went to the Curragh about 5 or 6 days before that race in Navan for Niall McCullough to ride her in a bit of work. And he rode her and was very happy. And when he jumped down, I said, no, Niall, I said, the reason I got you here was so you'd know her, so you wouldn't think that she was a bad mover. You know, that you'd know that she changes when she moves on. And of course, then Niall got hurt and we got Shane Foley at the last minute. And Shane didn't know her. And I think that, and you couldn't blame him for it, I think halfway down the back, Shane thought that there was something wrong with her because early in a race, when she has in her sleep mode, as I call it, she just goes along like a one that needs a pair of crutches. And then you change her hands and she just, like an airplane, she just opens up and away she goes. By the time that Shane knew this, it was a bit too late. Look, it was an unfortunate thing. And Shane is fighting out the championship, there's no doubt. He's a top-class jockey. And sure, you know, that's the way it went.
Well, I suppose the two stories for me this year definitely that stand out a mile would be sceptical because he was a rags to riches story. And unfortunately, his premature end was, that book didn't get fully written, I suppose, because he could have become Ireland's best sprinter. And he was gelded. He could have been this or that for many years. But the Princess Zoe story trumps that, Tony. And what fascinates me is, I know you've been to Germany before to get horses. How did you land on her? And, when she turned up that day in Navan, running off 64, who could have had any idea what was in store? So how did you actually acquire her in the first place for Pat Kyo?
Yeah, well, I have this man and the two of us. We go through you see, we go through all form, but you go to France, they want 150 grand for everything. So we haven't got that. So we sort of went to Germany because we could get horses at a better price. Like we bought Party Playboy last year, and he was just touched off in the English Sarwich. And that week then we bought this one, Princess Zoe, and she came here, and so we know the German form quite well, and we can buy them at a lot better than we can buy in France. So it was finances that pushed us, a bit like 30 years ago. Martin Pipe came over here and he couldn't afford to buy the horses, so he went to France, and that's what opened up France to England. Now that every second runner in England is a French import. It was Martin Pipe started all that. Maybe Francois Duman came over with a horse called Uppsala, and he won the King George. So, I mean, there's new frontiers the whole time, and you just get up and go and find them.
Before we get on to that, though, like, buyer beware. You got to go, you check out the car, you take it for a test drive, you get your mechanic to look under the hood. So I presume you did all that with Princess Zoe, right?
Well, I didn't go, but we had her vetted, obviously, and she was clinically sound. But you see, there's a difference between clinically sound and actually, when she arrived, then she was a little bit wrong of her conformation and quite stiff in herself.
What does wrong of her conformation mean?
That her front legs are not straight like a proper athlete. Or if you ever heard of a lad with bandy legs,
right.
She has a little bandy legs. So, but you see, when the vet goes to vet her, she was a woman vet, and she said to me that everything is clinically sound. So she was in a very place out in the back of East Germany. If you remember, before the Berlin Wall went down, it's out so it's quite hard to access. And I had been out there before, and it's a horrendous journey out to the back of Dresden. And I said, here, if the vet cert is fine, let her come on. When she arrived, then I nearly had a stroke. I rang your man in Germany. I said, here, what's this carry on? So, but at that stage we had her, and she was paid for and all. So away. Not too happy now, but I walked away anyway. And the next thing, we did a bit of fast work with her. Rang your man, says, I forget everything I said, don't worry about it. And
Tony, you wouldn't have bought this horse if you were gone to Germany. Would you have brought her home?
No, I would not. She didn't walk properly, but now she has improved a lot since she came. Gillian O'Brien is my chiropractor, and does all the muscles and feet and across her back, everything. And she has loosened her out, and she has become a real good walker now. And that I would say that they were probably training her on too fast a ground in Germany, and it didn't suit her. We train here on quite a deep sea sand, and it suits this one. So I'd say it took months of loosening out, and our blacksmith did little things with the feet as well. Mick Carway, he's very good. So, there's a lot of things involved here. You had to have a customer like Paddy Kyo, whose game is a gander. When you recommend something to Paddy, he trusts you, you can go and get it done. So then, when the check is written, then when we get her, Gillian O'Brien does a good bit of work with her back. The blacksmith or farrier does a good bit of work with her feet. And then I'm doing my work with her on the gallop. And then along comes Joey Sheridan, who to me is the next new champion. So there's a lot of people involved here, and the story has gone fantastically up to now anyway.
When you think about it like that, the different layers of things that have to happen, and it's, you know, it's a very straightforward, which of these horses is going to run this distance in the shortest amount of time. It should all be science. When it comes down to it, the amount of information and data points that we can collect these days, it should all be science. But actually, it really isn't. It's.
Well, you see, look, the only thing that keeps racing alive is that it's not an exact science. If it was, the biggest checkbook would own them all. So, I mean, this is one of the great stories where a small trainer with a relatively small owner can go and buy a second-hand horse who's well exposed and come on and beat them all. So, I mean, it's the fantastic thing about racing. A couple of years ago, you had Danoli for Tom Foley, another brilliant horse that came from, if you like, obscurity and was champion at all his levels right up through. And hopefully this one can do the same for us.
What did you like about Princess Zoe in Germany that you'd seen, that you thought, before you actually saw the horse itself, that you thought, yeah, actually there's enough in that background, in that pedigree, in that performance? Like, what goes into you going, we're going to recommend this horse?
Well, we looked at her pedigree, and she's by a horse called Jukebox Jury, who is by Monju, and Monju horses are. Better put my phone on silent here. I see lads.
I'd say they're ringing you to tell you, here, look, your phone's on.
But it just that we feel Jukebox Jury is a stamina horse, and he's actually standing here in Ireland now. He's only 8 or 10 miles down the road. So if you have a mare, send her on. But we feel he's a stamina horse, and they kept running this one over 1.1 miles. And as you know, last Sunday was 2.5 miles. They were running her over 1.1 miles on fast ground, and we brought her up to 2.5 miles on heavy ground. And we felt we could tell from the way she was running on at the end of these races that were too short for her, that she was crying out for a bigger distance. And I knew from the minute I got her that she wanted soft ground. That was quite obvious. So the combination of the two has brought about a massive improvement in her form.
I presume you actually bought her to go hurdling, did you?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, we bought her to be a great horse. You know, when we go hurdling is when we feel we can't go any higher on the flat. Do you know what I mean? You know, to say we buy a jumper, we buy a horse. You know, a trainer like me, or Willie, or Tom. We don't mind what it is as long as we win. And now that she looks to be a class horse on the flat, we're going to shelve the jumping for the moment anyway, you know.
I was going to ask you that because I was actually talking to Joe Foley, your good friend from Ballyhane, who we had on the show not that long ago. I was talking to him, I think it was before maybe the Galway race, and he was telling me how you were kind of just you discussed her potential value. And strangely enough, a mare, as much as she's achieved in terms of her actual stud value because of her pedigree and that stamina influence, she wouldn't maybe be quite as valuable as some would think. And at that stage, you were still going hurdling, I think. And the obvious race that you were going to go for at Cheltenham would have been the Dawn Run Novices Hurdle. So it was almost like the best conclusion to the story that could have happened, but without understanding what was going to happen at Longchamp. But you're telling us now that may not happen next year.
No, it won't happen next year anyway. So for this jumping season, she will not be jumping. And I doubt if she'll ever jump, but she certainly won't for the moment. We will be aiming at next year, possibly the Ascot Gold Cup. I know a lot of people think I'm crazy, but I still believe she's going to prove it at 1.5 miles. And I am certainly not dismissing the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe at this stage.
Wow. How old is she, Tony? I don't know. I should know that.
And she'll be the same age next year as Enable was this year. So they say 6-year-olds haven't a great record. But at the rate this one is improving, like, you know, it's just, if I could compare it to anything, it's like a junior, a special junior hurler suddenly becoming Henry Shefflin. You know what I mean? It's just something I've not alone in my yard. I don't think I've ever seen it anywhere before. A horse rated 64 coming on to win a Group 1 on the highest stage, you know, in Longchamp.
Would you even know if you had one? It was a brilliant question you were saying, you were asking. Was that a moment of doubt? Was that like a moment of introspection? Was that just how life is? You know, until you actually see something, until you live the experience, you can imagine it. But
yeah, well, I've often imagined, of course, like, I mean, we work 7 days, 7 nights a week. So, I mean, you're always dreaming of having a Group 1. But after 30 years, and I had never even got a smell of one, and suddenly, when it happened, you know, I was always wondering, would it ever happen? And then wondering, would I know when it had happened? By God, when it happened, I knew straight away. You know, my knees wobbled under me. I knew when she worked here 2 weeks ago, before she left for France, I knew that it was going to take one hell of a horse to beat us.
Can I ask how much you put this down to yourself? Because she wasn't obviously. Well, you had the fortune of having a horse who was obviously well handicapped and had probably been running over an inadequate trip. But conversely, when she arrived, she obviously wasn't 100% straightforward. So how much credit do you give yourself? I know you're a fairly humble character, but how much, in terms of your training achievements, is this the best?
Johnny, as you know, I'm brilliant. But I know there's an awful amount of people. I mentioned a few of them there, like the way Jackie Carter, who looks after her at home and when she travels. You have Gillian O'Brien, you have Mick Corwin, the blacksmith, you have Tim Brennan, the vet, you have Paddy writing the checks, and you have me doing my bit. I mean, the trainer's license is in my name, but the amount of people that goes into getting a Group 1 winner, any trainer that thinks he's done it on his own is a fool. I like to think I did my bit well and they did their bit well, and the whole thing, you know, I mean, it's a bit like saying Brian Cody is the whole answer in Kilkenny. He is brilliant at his job. The hurlers are brilliant at their job. The county board are brilliant at bringing them through every year. So, I mean, it's who made the best Kilkenny team? I don't think I think it's exactly what it is. It's a team. There's a huge amount in bringing, like Aidan O'Brien is a brilliant trainer, Willie is a brilliant trainer, but they have vets, head lads, blacksmiths, chiropractors, lorry drivers that make sure the horses travel properly. All these, there's a massive combination. And it's amazing, after a race, they all go into the number one, and you think, and you just see the three people, you know, the owner, trainer, and jockey. But in the background, there's a huge team, and everyone has to do their job right to be the best on the best day, on the big day, like it was last week. So,
I suppose what I love about it is the fact that this has been, you know, one of the most challenging years of many people's lives, I think, and it's obviously still ongoing. And owners only recently were able to go racing, and now they're not able to go racing, and racing itself was called off for whatever 3 months. And within the game, you know, it's been tough for people. And even speaking to punters, a lot of them have struggled for winners even since lockdown. And it's just been a very challenging year. But I think what this Mayor has done for racing, I don't think I've ever actually had a bet on Princess Zoe, and the enjoyment I've gotten out of watching her. I was in the Butchers in Rialto the other day, and the fella behind the counter who would normally be talking to me about Shamrock Rovers or this or that, all he wanted to talk about was Princess Zoe. The amount of people who I talked to would barely have an interest in racing, and they all seem to know about Princess Zoe. And to me, it's much bigger of a story than a mare winning races against other horses.
Yeah, well, you see, I suppose the Irish people as a race have always been sort of lovers of the underdog, because we've been a bit that way all our lives ourselves on the international stage. So they love to see the underdog coming. And here you have, as I said earlier, a small-time owner, a small trainer, an apprentice jockey, and a used car, if you like, of a horse. And now she has come right to the top and won on the world stage, as we call it. So we think that we were nearly as famous as Bennett was the week before on the Champs-Élysées. So, I mean, it's amazing to see, you know, his fantastic feat in Paris there in the Tour de France 2 weeks ago, and then we go back and do it again. Like, I know how big theirs is. We're so busy at ours that we probably didn't realize it. But it's just fantastic, and it makes all the years of grafting here with ordinary horses. It makes it all so worth it now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the graft, because I'm really interested in it. Just to remind everybody, our guest this week is Tony Mullins. This is Friday Night Racing. It's brought to you in association with Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. I did want to ask you about your training style, because you talked about the slightly deeper track that you were training on. Is that a family thing? Is that do you train in the same style as your brothers? Do you train in the same style as your dad? How have you changed and evolved, and how would you describe your own methodology when it comes to getting your horses ready for whatever the race is?
Yeah, well, you see, it should take me an hour and a half to really explain everything to you. But years ago, my father put in a very small little all-weather gallop in our place. You see, where Willie is training now, that was an out farm my father had bought years before that. But we never trained horses over there. Willie was the first to train there. And but when we were at home, accidentally, there was a young lad who used to go to school with us, Paul Hennessy, who is now the famous dog trainer. Paul, his family, they were milking people, and anyway, there was a thing called a big slurry tanker. It was only being invented at the time, and our gallop had got dusty during the summer, and he said he could bring up this big machine and water the gallop for us. And of course, we being young lads, of course, we way overwatered it, and the ground was bottomless, and so my father went crack, so he did first. And the next thing we noticed, we were having a lot more winners. And then we discovered that this quite deep ground, now you need good riders to be working in deep ground. You can't have any Johnny Joe soap riding horses. It's a bit of an art to ride horses in that type of ground. But that's what we did. And my father became champion trainership for the next 13 years at that stage. I think it was 13 years in a row he won the championship. Then Willie built his gallops over where he's training now, and carried on the same thing. Now I went a little different. I went for sea sand. They train on chips and sawdust. And I went for sea sand, and took me a good few years to get it, to get to know it, to get the right riders to ride it the way that it needs to be ridden and that. But basically, we'll say the fundamentals are the same, and it just took me a long time to get to learn how to work the sand. And but essentially, we train in a ground that the horses go 4 to 6 inches deep every stride.
That's amazing. So by accident, young lads caused the birth of the greatest training dynasty in national hunt and Irish racing history. That's a remarkable story.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but at the same time now, my father was second to old Tom Draper and to Jim Draper then when he took over in the Trainers' Championship before this. But then I'd say that this moved him on to another level, you know. So it's amazing how things evolve through mistakes, through trying new things, everything, and but it works well for us. But I know trainers who come, Willie's is now very famous, and rightly so, but trainers come over from England, they want to get a look at the way Willie is training in this soft ground, and they are amazed that anyone can train in that type of soft ground. But of course, there is a technique to it now. It's not just a matter of going out and having soft ground and gallop away till the horse can't stand. You've got to know how to train on that type of ground, especially with young horses, with babies, bringing them through. They're not able for that tough thing unless you do it right. And, to say it's easy, we find it easy now because we've been doing it for years. But just going out now and softening your gallop won't necessarily mean that you'll get the winners straight away.
You mentioned Jerry, you mentioned your father, Paddy, who was obviously, very groundbreaking in terms of a man of few words and all that. But Paddy had been alive, what would he have said to you after the race in Paris?
That was always his type of dream, you know. I mean, I remember when the last good filly he had on the flat vintage tipple, she won her maiden in Tralee first time out. And he was quite an old man at this stage. And he trotted off the stand and he caught me elbow. He says, I've been waiting for this for years. The excitement my father used to get out of the few good horses, good flat horses he had. You know, we trained jumpers and trained Dawn Run and Grable and Minaret's Girl and Hungry Heart. I mean, I could name them for half an hour. But the few good flat ones he had, you know, from humble beginnings, he used to be very excited with them. Very.
Saying that Paddy would have been the guts of 80 at the time, and from what I recall, she was quite nervous when she was travelling, so he used to literally get into the lorry with her and stand beside her in her travelling so she'd be okay getting to the races and getting to work.
I remember she was working up the Curragh just before the Oaks, and we had, you know, the old double horse box you'd have behind the Jeep, and he went out and painted out all the windows and the air vents and that with black paint. And next thing, loaded up the filly, told one of the lads, you're driving, he says, I'm getting in the box. And he stood with her. He was 84, maybe 85. He stood with her in the box the whole way to the Curragh and the whole way home. And when my mother heard about it, she went nuts. Anyway, so, of course, as usual, he didn't listen to her, and he went to the Curragh with her and won the Oaks. She was his attention to detail like that. It was amazing to watch him with horses. You know, I hear Aidan O'Brien now referring to it, and I believe he can do it. You know, Aidan O'Brien, Paddy Mullins, Willie Mullins, they can talk to horses. And everyone thinks, yeah, Jesus, they go on with this old load of baloney. They can talk to horses, and you know, they know that. You know, well, I feel as well that I can speak to my horses and get them to answer me. You know, to know how they're feeling.
What kind of stuff?
Sorry.
What kind of stuff? Like, what are you trying to find out from them?
You know, are you well enough for me to be hard on you so as you can win a race next week? You know what I mean? The whole point with horses, I'm sure, like athletes, I've never trained any hurlers or athletes, but the whole point is never to push them until they're ready to be pushed. And I mean, if you have a fit athlete, he can take, you know, you see them soccer players for Man United and might have to play 3 matches in 7 days, you know, in 1 week. I mean, if they're not fit enough, they won't be able to do that. So, I mean, if you push a lad early in the season, maybe his knees go, or I don't know what goes with soccer players or hurlers or that. But if you push them when they're not ready for it, they're going to do damage. So you've got to know when you're pushing the button that your project in front of you is ready for it. And, you know, that's why at the moment, I cannot draw my breath, you know, because to know, I have to decide now whether going back for this race in 2 weeks from next Sunday. I can't work her hard because she's having a hard time already. So I have to decipher now from our easy work whether we're in a fit state to go back on Sunday fortnight or not. And I can tell you one thing, I'm uptight about it, yeah.
And how do you make sure that your being uptight doesn't transmit to the horse, so that when you're asking the horse and however that conversation goes, you're getting an answer that the signal isn't somehow mixed up?
Yeah, well, a conversation is not really, you know, I mean, I ask her to do little things and I judge by her reaction. You know, that's the vibes I get. Like, she doesn't say to me, Tony, I'm not ready. Do you know what I mean? So you're reading from the things you do with her, you watch her reactions from the amount you feed her. We'll say we conventionally give about 12 pounds in the evening feed. So I'm over and back every 2 hours to see how long it's taken her to eat that 12 pounds. You know, yeah. When they're very well, they will have it eaten in sort of 4 hours. If they only barely have it eaten before breakfast tomorrow morning at 6:30, then you know that, you know, all these little things I watch her when she goes out on the gallop. Is she hyper, which means that, you know, maybe her blood is a little high, or is she dead in herself? That is she tired? And then again, of course, with a female, you have the worry of her coming in season. But I think we've checked her now, and her in-season cycle will be next week, which will give us a full week and a half into the race. So there's you know, I could go on here for 2 hours about the little things that you read into, and I was delighted. I saw Aidan O'Brien being interviewed somewhere lately, and you know, and you imagine it's always easy for someone like Aidan, you know, with all these facilities, and I was just delighted to hear him say, if you're not there, hour in, hour out, every day, you will not make a success of it. And I sort of, you know, I just said to myself, like, you know, I realize it anyway, that the checkbook just doesn't make them win. Checkbook might give you the better horses to train, but by God, you have to be a good trainer to make them win.
I think you're giving a good indication. Well, I firmly believe that people who don't necessarily get racing or haven't fallen for it, these strange people who haven't fallen in love with racing yet, I think the best way almost racing could sell itself is to show that person what goes on in the yard over the course of a day or over the course of a week, and the relationship between not only the horse and the trainer, but the horse and the lad or girl looking after the horse. And that goes way beyond sport, because it's a special thing. You know, and the older I get, the more I appreciate animals. And, you know, we forget sometimes that we're only one species of 8, whatever it is, million in the world. And horses are so special as well, Tony. And I suppose you've been around them all your life, but every day is different as well. And every animal is different and has different cares and needs.
Well, the first thing that drives me mad and really turns me off a person is a person who believes that a horse is a dumb animal. I mean, that just drives me off my head. Horses are very, very intelligent. And, you know, the dumb person that's looking at him that thinks that because they can't read the reactions of the horse. I mean, I only said to somebody last night that the one thing about a horse, he hasn't got within his DNA to be dishonest. When I hear people saying, oh, he's a dog, he's a very dishonest horse. What he has is a problem that the human can't decipher. It's not within a horse's DNA. Unfortunately, it's in the human's DNA to be dishonest, but it's not in a horse's. And any horse that's refusing to do something is because you haven't realized what his problem is and go about fixing it. And I am adamant on that. I know it for sure.
When you were a jockey, was it your intention to become a trainer always? Did you kind of grow up thinking, jockey first, I'll do that as long as I can, and then I'll become a trainer?
I tell you, most lads plan out their life. I think my plan at 12 was get out of school anyway. Whatever you do, get out of here. This is not suiting you. And I always dreamed of horses and dreamed of riding horses. And I had a great life at it. Really loved it. Very lucky to be riding for my father, you know, riding very good horses, the likes of Dawn Run and those, and there's stories in and out and that. But generally speaking, I loved it. And then suddenly I got a couple of bad falls near the end with my back, and I ended up training quite young. I shouldn't have been training as early as that, but I just couldn't stick the pain in my back anymore, and I was retired at, I think I only rode about 5 winners the last year, so effectively I was retired at 30. You know, they're riding up to 42 now. So I started training then. Then I realised what 7 days, 7 nights working was, and it's been a long, long haul, and the relief of getting a real good horse now is just something, you just can't put it into words.
Were there ever any doubts along the way that this was what you wanted to do? Or, like, you know, I can see just how much it means to you to have Princess Zoe now. When there must have been some dark times when the horses weren't performing and whatever you were doing wasn't working. Did you ever think of saying, right, I'm going to do something completely different, or I'm going to get into a different aspect of the game?
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly would never leave horses. That's for sure, because I think they're my mental therapy. I love relating to horses, even speaking to old retired horses out here. Old Pedro Bob is still out here, and I often go out and talk to him in the paddocks and that. And you know, just horses is what I'm made for. I love them. So I don't think I ever. But I mean, the financial strain of training there during the recession was phenomenal. Set me back, you know, many years. And to be getting going again now in the last 3 or 4 years has been a huge relief. It was very worrying there, 12, 13, 14, 15, maybe even 2016. We got going again then with a few horses, few nice horses. And now, you know, life is not an easy street, but it's viable. Where I would say that for 4 years running, I lost quite a lot of money that I didn't have to lose.
I guess coming up as well from the, frequently being involved in the family business, and I know it's not exactly the same business, but it is the same business in many respects, because the horses move, obviously, but there's a responsibility that the children feel a responsibility to continue in the line, and that somehow coming out of the family business would be an emotional thing, that you'd somehow, you know, you hadn't done enough service.
Well, yeah, I suppose when you're having a bad time and, you know, a quiet time, you're so busy trying to get back, you don't notice it. And then I suppose the relief when they get going again, you maybe look back and say, God, thanks be to God I got going again. This is a tough game. Many people have come in and set up their life in this game and be gone out of it in 3 or 4 years. And you see, years ago, that was okay when you galloped around the field. But now, with walkers and all-weather gallops and that, like, it's several $100,000 to invest to become a trainer now. To go out of business in 5 years is a serious, serious thing, you know. So the financial investment now towards years ago when we didn't even have a helmet to ride out when I was starting. You know, it's a very different game. It's a very professionalized game, and you see, a lot of people don't realise we are Irish people are very successful as a whole, but in our horse industry is it's the one thing that Ireland can say we are the best in the world at. We are the best breeders. I believe we have the best trainers and jockeys, and we have the best horses. Now that, going back to the famous stallion incentive, tax-free stallion incentive thing that Charlie Haughey brought in the late 60s, early 70s, which took about 30 years for it to grow. But now we have, through Coolmore, Rathbarry, different studs. Ballylynch is now becoming a huge stud here in Mount Juliet. I mean, these are world leaders now. These are not just successful in Ireland. They are the producers of the best thoroughbreds in the world. So this is a phenomenal thing, horse racing. And a lot of people that don't know racing say, oh, you can't go near that horsey set. They have their own old way. And some people can be guilty of that. By God, it is some, as long as you don't get caught up in the gambling side of it, it is some fun. Johnny can tell you they're not going racing, you know, that for the excitement that it gives him, and he never sat on a horse probably. Did you, Johnny?
Your audio's off there, Johnny.
Sorry, Tony. I've sat on a horse a couple of times. Just something that one of the things that I'd love to get into, like, because you know, I understand how difficult it is, but just like you're saying, just the game itself, and it is sad how we've had this year where that kind of social aspect, how it has been gone, but it's it's a fantastic game, and I think for the story of Princess Zoe, that's why we're in it. You don't need to be backing horses to enjoy that. And you mentioned your mother as well, and I'm sure she must have gotten a great kick out of that. The last time I heard you mention her was how she came back from Cheltenham ruined that she didn't back all of Willie's winners, but this must have given her a great kick.
Oh, sure. I was only talking to her about an hour ago, and at her age now, at 92 or just 92, and she said, "Do you know, Tony?" She says, "I don't know what this virus is about." She says, "If I got it anyway," she says, "why just didn't they let me go to Paris?" And she loves Paris and has always done. When my father trained winners there years ago, and Paris to her is, oh yeah. And I said, "Look, you could get the virus." And she said, "Wouldn't Paris be a lovely place to die?" So that's what it means to her as well. So the excitement around the whole thing for her, and as Willie said the other day, he was shouting at the telly at home. And there's another thing that I never thought. Here's Paddy Keogh and his sister Philomena, and they own the most exciting horse, we'll say, in Irish racing at the moment, the best story. And last Saturday was the first time they saw her running. I mean, it's hard to believe that you own one of the great horses or the great stories of the season. And that was the first time they saw her. And it looks like if we go back in 2 weeks' time, they mightn't get to go. I think racing will go ahead, but the owners have been stopped here again in Ireland. Now, and look, to say that Irish racing have done a brilliant job to keep this game going, and now this has become frustrating again, but hats off to the health people and Dr. Jennifer Pugh and all those that are doing Irish racing there, are doing the health thing around it. And it's fantastic that we're still racing. So hats off to them, but it's still very frustrating to think that Paddy Keogh and his sister own one of the greatest stories of the season, and they had to go to Paris to see her for the first time.
It is a real pity. Hopefully that will, I don't know what's going to happen next. Obviously the country, the figures aren't going the right way at the moment. Tony, I had one last thing I wanted to ask you about, and that was with Dawn Run. You mentioned a couple of times earlier on, the good and the bad. Obviously fantastic to be so close to such an amazing horse and to be involved with such an amazing horse, but there's also little bit of heartbreak for you, or maybe a bittersweetness is a better way of talking about Dawn Run actually winning the Gold Cup.
The first thing anyway was everyone was asking me, was I disappointed? I was disappointed not to ride her, but you have to remember, because our family had won the Gold Cup, so it was hugely exciting. Having won 15 races on her, it was disappointing. I suppose I was so young at the time. I really thought I'd win the Gold Cup the following year or the year after that on some other horse anyway. I just didn't realise that it was going to take me 34 years to get one on the flat, not to talk of, something to win the Gold Cup. So I was probably so young at the time that I wasn't as disappointed. And to say it'd be bitter is wrong. But, looking back now, I'd love to have my trophy there to say I won the Gold Cup on her. So it is disappointing.
So for people who are unfamiliar, you were the jockey that was most associated with Dawn Run all the way up to Cheltenham in '86. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, when John Joe went out on her that day for the Gold Cup, nobody had ever sat on her in a steeplechase race, only me. So I was jocked down just for the Gold Cup, which she had. And also I was jocked down for the Champion Hurl 2 years beforehand, albeit earlier in the season. So John Joe had 2 or 3 spins on her over hurls before he got to the Champion Hurl. But then I was flying on her over fences until that famous day in January, leading up to the Gold Cup, where we went over to give her a look at the English fences. And I got unseated and remounted and finished 4th and all that. But so as John Joe cantered to the start that day, and no one had ever ridden her in a chase, only me. So from that point of view, it was disappointing. But look, if she got beat, we'd probably never be talking about this. So, I mean, to be associated with the great Dawn Run is, and I remember my own little great days with her. I won the French champion hurl on her, which was Otay is only literally less than a kilometre away from Longchamp. It's on the other side of the Bois de Boulogne. So, I've had some great days with her. Disappointed that I wasn't on her in the Gold Cup.
And who makes that call ultimately on the day or in the build-up to it?
Well, obviously my father didn't jock me down. It was the woman who owned it, Mrs. Hill, and I think she always felt that John Joe was the man for the big day. So it was disappointing. I had been champion jockey the previous year, or joint champion with Frank Berry in the championship, and I had obviously got on very well with Dawn Run. I had won nearly every time I rode her, and so it was disappointing. But look, that's 34 years ago, and we won't worry about it.
I know, it's not even, it's almost like these things all go to make the character who you are, who becomes the trainer ultimately. And I wonder, does it have an influence on how you speak with jockeys and how you communicate with owners, all that kind of stuff? That, we are obviously an amalgamation of all the things that we experience.
Yeah. Somebody said to me lately that experience is an amalgamation of all your failures. So, I don't know. It wasn't Shakespeare now, but somebody said that to me. And, we are really. I mean, we've the things that you aren't as successful at, if you can cut out the little things, that mistakes, eventually it'll all come together as the right thing,
Yeah, no, 100%. And so while you wrestle with the decision, it sounds like from the way you've kind of dropped into conversation about the owners potentially seeing Princess Zoe again in Paris, that you're leaning towards putting her out again in 2 weeks?
I want to go. And again, now I don't want to be getting into this horse talk thing, but I mean, it's the filly I have to ask. If she's able to go, I want to go next Sunday. And the Sunday after, I want to go. As long as she's able, or we believe she's able, we want to go. And that will be the Pre-Royal Oak, which is the French Saint Leger. And that's on Sunday fortnight. So it's about 16 days from now. So it's quite a tight thing to ask a filly. She has to go to England, stay overnight, and then go down the Channel Tunnel and onto the train and over to Paris. So it's quite an arduous journey to do twice in a month, and then to run in these distance races on soft ground. So it's going to be a big ask. But the one thing about Princess Zoe is she hasn't let us down yet, and hopefully, if we travel, she won't let us down this time.
When you're talking about Dawn Run as well, just we'll say when she won the Gold Cup it was 1986, and Ireland was. I was only a kid, but I think the likes of yourself who remember it, Ireland wasn't in a great way, and I think she was a mare that lifted a nation in many ways that needed a lift, winning the Gold Cup. And it was funny, after the race, I was actually on the football show. But as is my want, I couldn't take my eyes off the race, because it was honestly one of the most memorable, if drawn out, finishes in a flat race or any race I'll ever see. But went on to the WhatsApp to check all these texts were coming in about Princess Zoe and all this. And Paul Byrne, who would have had horses with Willie and Emmett, obviously, he just texted into the group and he said, the mare is beginning to get up. And I just thought it was a beautiful way of putting it, because nobody who ever watch the replays of Peter O'Sullivan's commentary will ever forget those lines.
Yeah, I mean, that's so many people have said that to me since, that usually in flat races it's over quite quickly, but to look down that long straight in Longchamp, and she was etching closer, and then just to get up on the line, it was, it's a fairy tale, especially, a bit like Dawn Run going to the last that day in the Gold Cup. It looked like she was beaten. And then the famous line from Peter O'Sullivan, the mare is beginning to get up. And that's when everyone went crazy. And it seems to be that Princess Zoe has created the same reaction, which I'm delighted about.
Well, it's come full circle. Tony Mullins, it's been a brilliant hour in your company. I would happily listen to you for an hour and a half or 2 hours explaining the nuances and the differences between the gallops, but it's been really fascinating stuff. Continued success, and very rarely we do get the opportunity to say the whole country's behind you, but certainly in a couple of weeks' time, if you're back in Paris, the whole country will be behind you.
Well, I'd say they're behind Princess Zoe, and again I say I'm right behind her.
Great stuff, Tony. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
This is Friday Night Racing on Off the Ball, and it is brought to you in association with Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. If you want to get in touch, use the hashtag love every racing moment. Now, starting Monday was the horse we were on last week. Johnny failed to deliver a payday for the Tote Irish Injured Jockeys Fund last Saturday, finishing fourth in Tipperary. The fund currently sits at €2,230. We have another €100 bet for a Tote charity bet this weekend. A reminder, of course, that Tote.ie customers can get the Tote guarantee, Tote versus SP, on all Irish and UK racing. Check out Tote.ie for more. Where are we going?
Yeah, the start of Monday, I nearly wrote its death warrant, signed its death warrant beforehand by saying that the draw could kill it, and it's exactly what happened. But definitely want to keep on side. I'm going to back it the next day. Hopefully, gets a better draw. Joseph O'Brien just won the big fillies race with the 2-year-old there, Pretty Gorgeous, in Newmarket, and I think he can take the Dewhurst tomorrow with Thunder Moon, who was sensational in winning the national stakes at the Curragh. An absolutely amazing performance. Only concern is the ground, but it's probably not as bad. It's probably drying out a bit in Newmarket, and he must be fairly confident he'll handle it. And with all due respect to Aidan O'Brien, I think if Aidan trained this horse, he'd be a lot shorter. And I think Joseph can train. Joseph wouldn't be many miles from Tony Mullins down the road there in Tipperary. Very exciting horse. 255 tomorrow at Newmarket.
Okay, what kind of odds are you looking at?
Threes thereabouts, but looks like the Guineas winner next year if he can physically progress. He was absolutely sensational at the Curragh. Form was working out. The pocket he got out of to win the race was. I just advise anyone to watch it, but so he's very exciting. Okay,
so just give us the full name and time again tomorrow.
Thunder Moon in the 255. It's the Dewhurst, so it's. Obviously, it's top-level stuff from one Grade 1 winning trainer, Tony Mullins, to another, hopefully, in that neck of the woods. But, yeah, it's a cracking race. But, yeah, this horse looks an absolute machine.
All right, Johnny, good stuff. That is another Friday Night Racing in the books. We broadcast live every Friday afternoon from 3 o'clock across all of Off the Ball social channels. That's at Off the Ball on Twitter or youtube.com/Off the Ball. The best place to get us these days is on the OTB Sports app. And then, of course, again, every Friday evening from 8 on News Talk. I really hope you enjoyed Tony Mullins. We definitely did. It was good crack, and certainly a real insight into what that has been, a life well lived in racing, and now at the moment just cresting to its peak with Princess Zoe. We'll obviously preview that race in a couple of weeks' time once we get the declarations in as well. But another Friday Night Racing is in the books for this week. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.